about performance, because that's another big trend that we're seeing. And Michelle talked a little bit about that. So how do you guys manage performance? Do you all have, how many of you have performance review forms that you use religiously? Okay. And some of you are thinking about it or are toying with the idea. Do you differentiate based on those performance reviews? Do you give higher pay increases? How many give higher pay increases to the top performers? Okay. All right, so that's a pretty common model. And then how many of you have bonus or incentive that's based on performance? Okay, so pretty much that same group all the way along is focusing on paying for performance. Any other thoughts that you guys have about performance overall or what you're experiencing? How you guys structure it? Okay, so one of the things that we're seeing out there is that some organizations are suggesting that you blow up your performance management form and blow up your performance management plan and just start completely just coaching people. And I will tell you that we have 2 clients that have done that, and both times the employees within 2 years have come back and begged senior management to reinstate the performance review form. Not because they love the performance review form or the performance review process, because it was the only time of year they would get feedback. So if you don't want to do the formal standard, we have a form that we fill out every year, you must have some kind of teeth, some kind of accountability for your managers so that you know that that is occurring, those conversations are occurring. It's fine to do it on a coaching basis, but don't assume that those managers are doing it. You must have something that allows you to monitor and evaluate how effective they are. Again, it's just a huge potential risk area, and I hear a lot of organizations talk about how they're going to blow up their performance review plans, and I love the idea of focusing on coaching and focusing on professional development in lieu of actually, you know, the form and all that, but it's not gonna solve the problem. If you have managers who are not comfortable giving employees feedback, taking a form away is not gonna fix that. There's other issues at hand. So anyway, so just some things to keep in mind there. So some ideas. One of the challenges that we have right now is, you know, you've got a 2 or 3 or 3.2 or 2.8% merit increase, and people are like, well, how can we differentiate with a 2% or a 3% merit increase? It doesn't seem like it's worthwhile. So here are some ideas that you can consider. Some organizations, you know, are very uncomfortable doing things outside the box, but here's some ideas for you to think about. One is, if you have a really small increase, like a 2% increase or a 1.5% increase or something like that, even a 3% some people think is too small to differentiate, think about combining them so that you do an increase every 18 months. Now we're talking about, you know, a 5% increase or a 4% increase. That's going to get people's attention much more. They're going to be talking about it. The number sounds better for some reason than just 2 or 2.5. So even though the actual cost can be the same, the perception and the relative perceived value can be different. Also look at the possibility of using variable timing. And by this I mean, if you have a really strong performer, maybe they get an increase every 12 months. Or maybe even every 6 months if they're in a certain developmental phase of their career. But then folks who are further along in their careers, further along in their pay range, we may want to provide increases to them at the 18-month mark or the 24-month mark if we really don't have strong performers in there. So some ideas just to kind of give you a chance to think about how to do that a little bit differently. Another thing that we're seeing, and I just spent most of earlier this week doing training for a $1.8 billion company in Seattle, doing performance management training for their management team. And one of the challenges that they have, that many of us have, is, you know, they've got a 2.5% budget this year for their merits. And they're saying, you know, we've got people who really need to get moved up in the range and others who really should get flattened out. But if everybody knows we have a 2.5% pay adjustment or a 3% adjustment this year, and I get less than 2.5, I'm going to be really unhappy. So one possibility is to think to create two buckets, or what we call a carve out, where you have a total budget of, you tell folks, look, we've got a merit budget of 2%, then you take your other 0.5% or percent, and you use that to create payments for very high performers, or to create equity adjustments for those individuals who are below, who maybe came in really green but grew really quickly. So you can actually separate it out into two buckets, and that way you have this carve out, the ability to actually recognize that without people feeling, you know, like they aren't getting what they're due. Variable costs, variable compensation incentive plans are increasing. So you can see that more and more companies are participating, and more companies are providing incentive plans. And again, that's a way around, a way to recognize performance, a way to align your variable costs with your revenues, so that you don't have huge fixed costs during downturns. And we're seeing, again, a huge shift there. Something that I think especially the C-suite folks need to know about is this study that was done just last year by a researcher, and I don't remember which university it was, I think it was Chicago. But basically they looked at what an average employee contributes, the relative value that an average employee contributes to a company. And then they said, now what does that above average employee contribute? And they were able to quantify that the above average performer actually contributes 191% of what an average performer contributes to the bottom line of the business. And this one, most people fall off their chairs when they see this number. Below average performers actually contribute 8% of what an average performer is, in part because they kind of stir the pot. They like bring down folks around them a little bit, plus, you know, they're just not getting the work done. Other people have to redo their work and so on. So
what with government level job, because that wouldn't happen in small business, right?
it happens in
Yeah.
small
Oh,
business,
I-
and this is for-profit positions that they looked at this in for-profit companies. Small business, probably you can't hide quite as well, but we've all had them, haven't we? I mean, we've all had that one. I've got one right now. It's like, you know what, he's dragging me down and the team with him, and I just, you know, I'm struggling with, you know, what do I do? When do I do it? How do we manage it? How do we do it so that it damages the business in the least way, you know, has the least effect on the business? It's tough. It's tough, but it really can have a big effect. So important information and new research.